Chapter 24 of Dave Dashaway, Air Champion, by Roy Rockwood. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. Chapter 24, The Hidden Diamonds.
"Look out, Dave!"
shouted his young assistant, and, as a snap sounded, he shot a quick hand towards the lever operating the rear control mechanism. "Blade cracked. Nothing serious," instantly announced the pilot of the Ariel. The machine had been hit in turning shorewards with a big wind blast that boomed like a cannon and bore down upon it heavily. They felt the machine shiver and swerve, and there was some lateral flapping. Dave, however, kept steady on back over the course he had so recently won. It took 20 minutes to overlap the shoreline. They made out a harbor, and upon the pier, at its end, the flag of the life-saving service.
"You won't lose time landing, Dave?"
spoke Hiram anxiously.
"We might catch up yet."
"Got to land," reported Dave. "We can't risk the blade snapping." The Ariel was directed across a flat sandy reach near the end of the pier. Dave sprang out instantly and ran towards two men who had watched the descent. "Schooner in distress," he announced briskly to the men. "I think she is sinking." "Where away?" was inquired. Dave described the position of the imperiled vessel as best he could. The men ran down the pier. Almost immediately a signal bell tolled, and a steam yacht and two lifeboats set out on their mission of rescue. Dave had hurried back to the Ariel. He had the machine overhauled in a trice. One blade was seriously damaged. Those on the Ariel were of hard spruce wood with a filling of mahogany. The lower veneer had stripped off and was dangling. "It's a wonder it didn't strike the tail and cripple us," observed Dave as he got out some tools and catgut and had the defect remedied quickly. "I think that will last." A report officer of the service had strolled to the spot and asked some questions, which Dave answered.
"He's writing down our names,"
whispered Hiram to his comrade. "All ready," ordered Dave. "Good luck!" shouted the officer after the ascending machine.
"I suppose it's hopeless to think that we're going to even make a showing in this race," spoke Hiram disconsolately.
"I fancy you are right," replied Dave, as steady as he could. Hiram was in suspense and misery. About 20 miles further along, they made out one of the laggard airships fighting its way against the wind. From its maneuvers, it was easy to surmise that all its pilot was aiming at was to keep out of trouble.
"Out of the race and knows it," commented Hiram. "I suppose it's 40 points more for the Whirlwind."
Dave said nothing. He was thinking of the possible disappointment of Mr. Brackett. He speeded the aerial to its best pace, but had no hope now of reaching the international grounds first. Hiram was in great suspense as they came up to the grounds from the south. His eager eyes scanned the center field. Then he fell back in his seat with a groan.
"One in. We're beaten, Dave," he almost sobbed. "It's the whirlwind."
They could see the Waldeck machine plainly as they descended. There was a crowd around it. Dave landed near the judge's stand, turned the aerial over to two attendants in the employ of their hangar, and went to headquarters to report. Bruce came running up to Hiram with a decidedly long face.
"The blackboard gives the race to Waldeck," he spoke in a subdued tone. "I guess they've won it," snapped Hiram. "Lording it over all creation, I suppose."
"They feel pretty flighty," pronounced Bruce. "I'm dreadfully sorry."
"Where's Mr. Brackett?"
asked Hiram, looking about for their friend and backer.
"Why, he was called to Chicago on business and had to go.
Said he'd be back by evening, though." It was with a laggard, disheartened way that Hiram proceeded to the hangar. Dave joined the boys soon after. He tried to act cheerily, but secretly he was quite depressed. He had done his best. Better than that, he had done just right. Business was business, however. Dave realized how greatly Mr. Brackett counted on the aerial coming out victor and winner of the big prize. It was not so much the amount involved that the manufacturer cared for, as a final recognition of the superior qualities of his machine.
"There's the fancy stunt event left yet," intimated Hiram after a somewhat gloomy spell of silence.
"Of course we will make a try at that," declared Dave briskly. "I can't think of letting our practicing go for nothing."
"But 50 and 40 make 90, grumbled the disconsolate Hiram. "There are only 30 points in the stunt event."
"Perhaps we can pick up a few points in the last day minor events," suggested Dave hopefully. Hiram would not be comforted. He spent a miserable afternoon. It added to his wretchedness as he wondered what Mr. Brackett would say. Hiram did not regret their action in the instance of the sinking vessel. All the same, their backer had a right to suppose they would have thought of his business interests first. They came across the manufacturer just as they were going to supper. Hiram looked pretty serious as Mr. Brackett advanced towards them. He was all smiles and animation. He grasped first the hand of Dave, and then that of Hiram. "Boys," he said, with a thrill of heartiness in his voice, "I'm proud of you."
"Why, you see, don't you know that we lost out on the long-distance race?"
stammered Hiram. "The long-distance race is entirely secondary to what you two have done," declared the manufacturer. "I fancy you haven't seen the city evening paper. Well, there it is." Mr. Brackett drew a late edition from his pocket. He shook it open and held it in front of his young friends. "I'd rather be Dashaway and Dobbs, the way that article tells about them," said Mr. Brackett, "than win 20 races, and all the prizes going." There, sure enough, was glory and honor for the young aviators. A telegram with full details told of the sure winner of the long-distance race putting back to give warning to save a vessel fast sinking in mid-lake with all on board. "That's the kind of advertising that counts," cried Mr. Brackett with vim and satisfaction. "But we've lost first place," mourned Hiram. "Not in the estimation of the world at large. That will not soon forget the Ariel and its crew." Dave was relieved at the way his backer took the incident. It enhanced his regard and respect for a true friend and a true man 1,000-fold. The following day was to be given over to amateurs and the exhibition of machines and their utilities. There was no thought in the mind of Dave of giving up the fancy stunt event, even if the grand prize had escaped him. "I say, Hiram," suggested Bruce the next morning, "can't you take me on a little trip this morning? We've got nothing much to do today except wait for tomorrow." "Where do you want to go?" inquired the pilot of the Scout. "Oh, west. In fact, well, Hiram, I'd like to go to Wayville." "Same old idea about those diamonds still in your mind, eh?" asked Hiram. "See here," replied Bruce eagerly, "I've got good reason to believe that the trip is worth making. You'll see when we get to Wayville. I'd like to have you land right where that diamond robber left the Scout and show me as near as you can the route he took." "All right," assented Hiram. "You won't rest until you get there, I suppose." The Scout made a fast trip to Wayville. It was at the same hilly spot where Hiram had parted with his uncomfortable passenger that eventful night that he brought the machine to anchor. "Here we are," he announced, and he proceeded to describe as best he could the movements of the fugitive after he had left the Scout. "That nearest thicket over yonder is the one he dove into first." "Come with me, Hiram," invited his comrade eagerly. "You are sure he went through that thicket?" "We'll go too. Do you see that?" he inquired, as halfway through the densely wooded space they came to an old hut. "What about it?" asked Hiram. "Well, that was a favorite hiding place for that man Wertz I've told you about, when he wanted to keep out of the way of people hunting for him to call him to account for some of his misdeeds," explained Bruce. "How well I remember it! Ever since you described the spot, I have wondered if the diamond thief, who was just such a character as Wertz was, didn't know about it, maybe visited it in trying to escape." "Why," observed Hiram as they came to the front of the rude structure, "that padlock on the door looks rusty enough to have been untouched for ages." Bruce tried the door, but nothing less than a crowbar would budge it. "Aha!" he ejaculated suddenly. "Look, the cellar window." "Smashed in, I see," spoke Hiram. "One pane of glass, yes," proceeded Bruce excitedly. "And look, too,
Stains of blood on the fragments of glass in the window frame. Oh, say, I know. There's a cistern right under that window. I remember it perfectly, and... Hiram, help knock out the rest of the window. I'm going to get into the house that way."
"And drop into a cistern?" railed Hiram.
"It's an old leaky one, and was dry as a bone. I remember when I was here with Wirtz." They smashed out the window frame with a piece of plank they found nearby. Bruce let himself cautiously backwards through the aperture. Hanging by both hands, he let go.
"It's all right,"
his voice sounded hollowly.
"Throw me down some matches."
Hiram awaited the next developments with some impatience and considerable curiosity. Then he saw a hand grasp the inside window frame, then another, and he tugged at the shoulders of his struggling comrade and pulled him up into the daylight.
"For gracious sakes, where have you been? In some dirty hole, I do declare," cried Hiram.
"It was dirty, but I don't care about that," panted the other youth. "Ouch!" and he proceeded to rub some dirt out of his left eye.
"Shall I help you?"
questioned Hiram anxiously. "No, it's out now," was the answer.
"Good."
Bruce was covered with dust and cobwebs. He scrambled to his feet breathless, but his eyes were fairly snapping from some intense excitement.
"Where's your cap?"
asked Hiram, noticing that his friend was bareheaded.
"Oh, that's all safe, and everything else,"
cried Bruce, and he unbuttoned his coat and revealed his cap all wadded up.
"Just look at that!"
he shouted, and he opened the cap. Within it rested a great heap of jewelry, blazing with crystal sparks of radiance.
"The diamonds!"
gasped the astounded Hiram.
"I guess so,"
answered Bruce.
"The bargain with the jeweler was $5,000 reward. As my partner, Hiram Dobbs, I shall have the pleasure of handing you over just half of it. $2,500.
End of chapter 24.